Welcome to Talk Tantra to Me. It is such an honor to be holding space for this divine knowledge to make its way into your ears and lifestyle. Andrew is back on the podcast.
What's up, everybody?
Andrew was featured earlier in this podcast. I don't remember the exact numbers. I think that they're like 90,
69,
97, and 98 or something like that. But they're titled High Vibe Relating Part 1 and Part 2. So we recorded those in the fall in October, and we're now in March, and a lot has happened. A lot has happened since then.
A lot has happened. Yeah. Do you want the title of this one to be Low Vibe Relating, or we just talk about like the shit that isn't working in a relationship?
I think that there's a lot of space for us to share how we work through our low vibes.
I think that's a great idea. I know that wasn't going to be the content of this, but here I am already kind of taking control of the podcast.
We'll come back to that. But a lot has happened since then, which we're excited to share with you. But the main thing really is that we're engaged now. We're getting married.
Wait, who proposed to you?
You proposed to me.
That's right, I did.
Andrew got down on one knee in South Africa, in my favorite place, in the most perfect way. And
did you tell everybody how I did it, or like the TLDR?
I did some TLDR, but we could definitely explore that a little deeper in this podcast. But the intention for me of this podcast was to introduce Andrew to all of you guys even more. With like the first couple of episodes we did was really just about our relationship. And it wasn't so much about how fucking amazing this man is and like what, to me, like to be who I am, to find someone that I feel meets me in that, and in fact inspires me to be a better woman every day. It's like, it would be a disservice to me to keep you and like your magic away from this community that I've built. Like, everyone deserves to see who you are and the special, unique, incredible ways of meeting the world that you bring to the table, to our relationship, and also to like your work and to your mentees and to your family. Like, I've been constantly inspired by the way Andrew shows up as a leader in like every part of his life. And it's like really given me a lot of inspiration of what's possible. And I'm so excited to build a family with you. And I'm just a rambling mess right now, but we're both crying.
Yeah, for those who are listening, my eyes are filled with water, and as Leola was talking, her eyes began to start tearing up as well. Like, I knew all of those things that you just said intellectually, but hearing you declare it so publicly just now, and just, oh, that really just hit. So thank you.
Yeah. So I feel like Andrew is going to be someone that's going to be around and going to be in this content, whether I'm recording solo or with him or with someone else. Like, he's already been in so many episodes since.
I'm always going to
be there. Yes. Okay. So,
one of my most favorite things to do.
Can I finish?
Yes, absolutely, you can. One of my most favorite things to do is when, like, Leola is such a pro, right? And I love when she's being a pro, just busting her balls. I love it.
It's actually disrespectful. You want to talk about, he gets so upset when I interrupt him when we're hanging out with our friends, and now he's doing it to me in the place that's important to me. Oh my God. Okay. So anyways, I don't even want to give you more compliments, but I feel like I need to like close the circle here. So Andrew's going to be present. He's already present in so much of my work, and a part of this relationship, a big piece of this relationship, if not one of the primary intentions for myself and really for us, is to be evidence of what is possible, and to really build like trust with you guys and this relationship. I feel like there's an opportunity to get to know Andrew a little bit better, and also to give him the opportunity to share more of himself and more of his magic and more of what's working in his story, and find those pieces that are relatable that you might be able to take home, to your own life, partnerships, whatever.
And yeah, I'd love to preface all of that with like, I'm also just superhuman as well.
Superhuman.
No, not, I don't mean like superhuman, like Superman.
Yes, he does.
I just mean like I'm very, what's a very,
The double entendre. He means both.
I'm like, I'm like, I'm very much just a person that makes mistakes and screws up and I'm just a very human.
And that gets to be a whole other podcast, is that we're not going to pretend that we don't have all the issues and arguments. I don't necessarily want to go there today, but that's something that we have the intention of sharing more. Our superhuman qualities are things that make us super fucking human and also superhuman.
Yeah, because like to be human is to be imperfect and fallible. And at least in my experience, we talked about this a little bit in the first podcast I was on. So much of podcasting and Instagram and is showing the veneer and the highlight reel of life. And that's cool. And there's a place for that. It's dope to see dope shit.
Yeah.
And I think there's a gap missing, and there's a space to be filled of authenticity, realness, and vulnerability, which can be hard to do in such a public forum.
Yeah.
But I would like, at least one of the little mini intentions of this podcast is for me to fill a little bit of that gap.
Yeah. And here we are. So introducing today's guest, we have Andrew on the podcast, my fiancé, the best cock I've ever had. He asked me to say that as part of the intro. And also just an all around amazing, inspiring human. And another thing that I love about you, and I feel is really relatable to a lot of people, is that in a lot of ways, you're moving through the world at a more traditional trajectory than I do, at least. And I'd love if you could share a little bit more about who you are, what you do, how you got into this part of your life. And that's really broad. And I know that there's so many ways to take that. And it's like, how far back do you want to go? But organically, where are you feeling called to start?
Sure. Yeah. Let's go into, so the word that stuck out to me was traditional path, and let's go into that. So,
Okay.
Yeah. So I think I know what you mean by traditional path, but let's just define it.
Yeah. And I also want to be clear that you are far from your path is very unique, and it's not necessarily a traditional path. And I don't think that the way that you see the world is entirely traditional. It's just in comparison to me being and dating like a software engineer is not necessarily where we thought we'd end up, but the unique and non-traditional way that you meet all areas of your life is so expansive. And that's, I think, what's really magical.
Yeah. I think you thought you would end up with a guy who wears like way more beads than I do.
Yeah, I did. And he definitely had longer hair, although Andrew has been growing his hair longer since we met. So taking my influence.
You've got like 2 more months of this long hair before it gets buzzed off. Also,
2 months. I thought I had like a week left.
I'm starting to actually kind of like it.
Fuck yeah.
But yeah, I think what you meant by traditional was like kind of like what I do for money.
Yeah.
And then yeah, and even that, I think on its face, for sure, being a software engineer and being in that space, I feel like everyone knows what that is and kind of what they do for the most part. I consider myself like super lucky and fortunate to be in the space. I really, really love what I do. I also like not all software engineering gigs are like this. I happen to work with some amazing humans who help make my job really awesome.
Yeah.
And then there's a tremendous amount of autonomy and freedom as well. So I'd say like the traditional like 9 to 5 job is like got to come in, got to commute into work, need to be there. Someone busts your balls if you're there at 9:03. You got to let someone bust your balls if you're not there till like 5:30 or 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock. Barely meeting like paycheck to paycheck, can't meet like a $500 expense if an emergency was to happen. And that's kind of like, that's the traditional route. I'm fortunate enough to where like that's kind of not the reality of my life.
Yeah, I would say you have a high level of freedom in your work, and that freedom comes from both having time freedom, but also having the level of abundance that allows you to have the freedom to make the types of decisions that we make in terms of our lifestyle and things like that. So holistically, like you have like a very liberated life.
It's not, yes to all that. And it's, and one of the levers of that freedom is with most jobs, I am trading my time for money.
Mm-hmm.
And that still happens in software engineering. But what also happens in software is we are provided opportunities to take share in the businesses that we provide value to.
Yeah.
And the leverage that can create financially is owning a part of a business is where people make real money, or is a way that people make real money.
Yeah.
And real freedom. And then, so that equity and shares and whatnot is a lever of cash and abundance that isn't tied to the amount of labor that I put into it.
Yes. I love all this. And I'd like to direct us into more depth.
Of 100%. Well, you could get me talking about like just straight up money for probably 19 more hours.
Yeah.
You can move us away from that.
Yeah. I think that there's a lot of space, and recognizing that my perspective on abundance and Andrew's perspective on abundance are quite different, but actually very complementary. And I have a more feminine perspective. Andrew very thankfully has a more masculine, structured, planned out perspective. And I think that's something that we can look forward to, but I would like to get deeper. And with that, want to ask you, what is your passion? And how do you use your passion to bring purpose to the world, to your job, to your family, things like that?
Fuck yeah. I'm super down to talk about my passion. And
I knew there was something else.
And I actually think that our views on our abundance are exactly the same. It's the like then the outcome and the strategies that we use after that are where we diverge. And
I agree.
And I'll say what we mean. And ultimately, I think you and I both believe that abundance is a vibration, it's a feeling, and it's a mindset. And the more I tap into that, the more I'm going to have.
Yes.
And then it's how I get tapped into that and how you get tapped into that where we diverge.
Which is how it is with everything. Since we started dating, it's been like we both have the same vision. We just have different ways of getting there. And that's like probably one of our core like friction points, is that we'll get stuck in our way of doing things. And it's been an initiation to learn from each other and to take each other's influence in moving closer to our vision by using our unique and complementary skill sets and perspectives.
Yeah, and techniques. I'd love to give an example because I think it like totally will bring it all home.
Sure.
And so a way that I get plugged into like all the abundance and like look at like number go up and to the right, oh my gosh, is I start like every morning, part of my morning routine is going through my budget software and allocating my budget. That actually is like super fun for me. And I watch just numbers move up and to the right over time and gets me plugged into that vibration.
Yeah.
Whereas Leola, and I'll speak for you, tell me if I screw this up at all.
Sure.
It will have like sex magic abundance events, which is super dope.
And they work.
And they're great. And that I think gives it's like a perfect microcosm of the macrocosm.
Yep. I would agree. And in combination, it is the dream team. But let's get back to the depth piece.
100%.
What are you passionate about, and how do you use your passion to bring purpose to the world?
I'm pausing here. This is like one of my like favorite questions and like least favorite questions at the same time.
Yeah. Can I share my perspective of you in this? And like I have, so when Andrew and I fell in love, the moment that I sensed the possibility, like I had a crush on him and I felt the potential, but like
You had a crush on him?
When I truly first made that shift of like, hold on a second, was because Andrew was asking me, what do you want? And he wouldn't just settle for, I want like everyone to be sexually free and like safe in their bodies and like my super curated answer. He's like, no, what do you really want deep down? Like all, like really getting to my core. And to me, that is one of those pieces that really represent how you bring purpose to the world. And it's, to me, like my experience of you with that is like finding this passion of like lighting people up and getting them connected to their vision and helping them see what the next step is, what's getting in the way, like how can I help you with that? How can I bring you closer to well-being? And it was actually him doing that, him enrolling me in my own vision, that not only lifted me up, but also allowed me to see his potential and also allowed both of us to like see each other's visions and realize how parallel they were. And which was a surprise to both of us because we both were like, we're kind of different people. But when we noticed that our visions were the same, and there was a moment where I think you had said, I don't think we want the same things. And I was like, are you serious? We just talked about our visions. They're clearly the same. We just have different ways of getting there. And you were like, yeah, that's true. And I think that to me was like a pinnacle moment for us.
I like in my mind, I didn't see software engineer and sex priestess like that, like didn't make sense. And so I like prejudged desires and wantings.
Yeah.
And then when we dug in, I'm like, oh my gosh, we're not so different, you and I.
Yeah.
And so to build off of that and to answer your question, my passion is well-being and desire. And I'll clarify on what I mean by that, because desire is a very loaded word. In my opinion, and through my experience, I suffered a bunch. I tried a lot of things. And I tried having the hot girlfriend. I tried having the house. I tried having the impressive sounding job. I tried having a huge group of friends. I tried drugs and alcohol. I tried
a lot of them.
having like the fancy stuff in the house. I tried having the car. And if you're seeing a trend, I tried a lot of these different types of things. And I thought all of them would make me happy. And this is a trope. And they didn't. And so it was posited to me at some point and was like, Andrew, why don't you just cut out the middleman and go directly for the well-being in and of itself? And what I found is none of those are prerequisites for well-being. I can actually choose into that literally right now. And I'll be even more specific about what I mean by that. Because it's not like I am like suicidally depressed. And then I just think, why don't I be happy? And then I am happy.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm talking about. What I am talking about is using well-being as a North Star, as like almost a moral, if you will, is it helps me to filter my decision making so that over time I make different decisions and different actions. And those different decisions and different actions create an environment which engender different thinking over time. And then those thoughts eventually turn out to be my emotional nature.
And how would you define well-being? What does that actually mean?
For me, and this is again like almost self-referential or tautological, but I define it as like peaceful contentedness. I purposely use it instead of happiness because happiness is also an incredibly loaded word. But if I were to extend that, it'd say, when I wake up in the morning, how am I feeling? What is my first thought? How does my body feel? Is there a vibration kind of anxiety? Do I like at Sunday night? Am I feeling like the Sunday scaries and a little bit of anxiety because I have to wake up tomorrow and go be me in the world? Or is that not even part of my brain at all?
Yeah.
Am I vibrating at like a neutral or +1 above neutral? Am I generally feeling pretty darn good about stuff from day to day? And I do that in aggregate, and I do that over time, like over days and days and days.
Yeah.
And then I basically ask myself, it's like, all right, how's it been? And if I can answer, you know what, pretty fucking good. That's how I would classify well-being.
Yeah. I feel well-being compared to happiness, well-being has a more holistic feeling to it. And all of this, I feel like, is really in alignment with living a tantric lifestyle. It's like Tantra is to expand and liberate. And to me, well-being isn't just like coasting by, it's creating growth in your life, getting better every day, and also feeling more yourself and more free every day. And so it's weirdly like very much in resonance with my teachings. So how did you get here though? Because I obviously know a little bit more of your story, and like it wasn't always like that.
Oh, definitely not.
And it still isn't always like that, but it's always, that's the North Star, which, you know.
I have like, I will say that like 9 days out of 10, like actually I'll go back like to what it was like before I go to like what it was like now. So I'm 39 now, and in my mid 20s, like from my mid 20s back to about, I'll say 17, 16. And this got progressively worse. I did not feel comfortable in my own skin. I didn't feel comfortable in who I was. And that grew into a suicidal depression, where I, for the better part of 5 or 6 years, woke up most days when my first thought was, fuck, I don't know how I'm going to do this today. And well, anecdote as to what it was like back then was there was this one day in particular I remember where I woke up, the sunlight hit my face, and I was like, fuck. And I took a comforter and I nailed it to the window to black out the sun in my room, and then rolled up towels under the door jamb so that no light would come through, so that I could be in a pitch black room and not have to face the world, not wanting to be alive.
Wow. And what happened that how did you get to the other side of that?
That is a very, very long story, and I'll summarize it very briefly and very shortly.
Not too short. We like the details, but
want the details?
Not too.
I don't have to go into the gritty details, but the prerequisite for getting for straightening out, it was a necessary but insufficient condition for well-being and like catapulting my life, was removing, and this is not prescriptive to anyone else, this is my path and my path only. I'm not saying this is what you need to do.
Yeah.
This is what worked for me. Drugs and alcohol were not working. And so the first thing I had to do was remove those from my life entirely, period, full stop. Then once the cloud from those were removed, guess what? Those weren't fixing anything, and removing them didn't fix anything. As a matter of fact, in the short term, it made shit worse. Because guess what? All of the medicine I was taking to not feel the things I was feeling, I didn't have anymore.
Yeah.
So now I'm coming face to face with all these emotions. And so by worse, I mean, it just felt shittier. But the funny part about all of those emotions and all of those feelings is that was my body and mind screaming at me that I was not living in alignment with my conscience.
Yeah.
So while it hurt in the short term, actually what it did was force and push and motivate me to be like, what the fuck are you doing with your life?
Yeah.
And if I made alcohol and drugs no longer an option, I couldn't hide from those voices and those feelings anymore.
Yeah.
So I had a couple of choices: fucking white knuckle and just keep suffering this way, or find a solution.
Can we pause here for a second?
For sure.
I just want to go a little deeper on this self-medicating, quote unquote, that we tend to do in society with all sorts of things. And Andrew, in this circumstance, is sharing that it was drugs and alcohol. For me, it was being sexually promiscuous and outsourcing love and validation to other people. And that was the drug, the addictive relationships that I was having that I got to quit. And it was also very similarly, like, really much harder at first. And like that healing of like releasing your attachment to one thing and then trying to find meaning in something else is like a very crunchy chapter. But I think that like what it comes down to here is recognizing what part of your life is not working, taking ownership of it and letting it go to make a more empowered choice. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're never involving yourself in some of these behaviors or drugs or alcohol or anything ever again. Or for me, it was like I stopped watching porn for a while. I stopped playing in the BDSM and kink scene because I realized what I was doing was constantly re-traumatizing myself. But now I'm able to go back to some of those themes and like approach it from a place of empowerment. How can I go deeper into how can I use these things that used to be very damaging to me to go deeper into my human experience and to explore more? I think you've had a similar experience with certain plant medicines and drugs as well, although, still sober from alcohol.
Yeah. The formula that I use, and yeah, Leola, thanks for adding on to that, because I think that's just a human experience. And my experience is it's the same kind of experience. It's just a matter of degree.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. And so the person who is watching 2 hours of, reality TV show to like escape work, that's the same kind of shit. It's just way different in the degree of consequences over time, and depth of like suffering and pain. So the heuristic or the formula that I use to check in on is like, am I doing this because I don't want to feel a thing that I'm feeling?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like, yeah, I am. And sometimes I'm like, I'm going to go ahead and do that. And that's okay. I'm going to eat this cupcake and I know I'm doing it because I'm sad. And that's fucking okay. I'm also allowed to give myself some grace.
Yeah.
But back then, it had gotten to a point where it was pathological and it was causing massive damage to my body, my spirit, my relationships, and my life as a whole. So I gave myself a like live or die option, really. And I chose life. And so what did that look like now that I started to feel all of the things? And I was lucky enough to encounter a mentor who had a similar background and experience that I had with drugs and alcohol, and who had all of the things that I wanted, all of the outside stuff. But most importantly, when I sat down with this guy, he had this energy, this zeal, this zest for life. And I was like, I don't know what that is, but I want it. When I sat down with him for the first time, he was like, I don't know if I have space for you in my schedule. I'm super busy. I've got like 3 or 4 businesses. I already have like 5 to 10 like mentees that I'm working with. I don't know. And then he kept going and going. And as he's talking just about his life, about business, and about all sorts of stuff, I stop him right in the middle. I say exactly that. It's like, whatever this is, man, I want it. And I want it so badly. And you want to know what he said?
The vulnerability, first of all, to just ask for that. Like, I just want to give you so much props to be able to do that and ask for that, especially being where you were in your journey. Like, I have such a hard time asking for help and things like that. So I just want to honor you for that. But what did you say?
Thanks, babe. He was like, fuck. So once I was that vulnerable with him, he could see I wasn't messing around. And I was like, I have to take this guy on.
And that's the power of vulnerability.
100%. And so then we went through the process of cataloging all my thinking that didn't work and replacing it with thoughts that might work a bit better.
Yeah.
We did that over the course. We met weekly for like 3 years.
Wow.
Cataloged them, went through them, checked them. He was available by phone too when I was struggling. And then I started, and this is the real key. This is a real key.
Yeah.
Then I started mentoring people in the same fashion, all for free, not business. It wasn't a coach, no program. It was all for free.
Wow.
And so I started returning the favor to other young men who were suffering like I was suffering. And that did a couple of things. One, right, there's one thing being mentored and then doing it in life. It's a whole other fucking thing to teach another human being how to do it. So my level of understanding of how to do that just skyrocketed.
Yeah.
And then two, there is, as far as self-esteem goes, it was said to me once, Andrew, if you want self-esteem, do esteemable things. Well, that makes sense. Huh?
That checks.
that checks out. To have someone's mother at their wedding. This is one of my mentees, his mother at his wedding, come up to me and thank me for helping save his life.
Yeah.
I'll never forget that moment.
And all of this started by like one person just being their authentic self, which was effervescent and magnetic, and offering those codes to you, which then becomes this infinite chain reaction into the universe. And like, this is just a moment that I'd like to really hammer in for people listening, is like, how can you show up in your beingness and your fullness and see what potential lies there?
It was a giant MLM scheme of happiness. That's what I like to say.
That's cute.
And it was also posited to me that if I wanted a couple of things, if there's a gap, if I'm feeling a gap within myself, how am I bringing that into the world? And the more I like, in order to keep a thing that I have, in this case, my sense of peace and contentedness and well-being, that in order to do that, I have to give it away.
Yeah.
In some way, shape, or form. And that mentorship and giving it away, I attribute like 95% of my success in the world, and from my relationships to my net worth.
Wow. Mic drop.
and that's a strat, like it, and that's, again, it's not prescriptive. This isn't like, this is how you do it. It was the way I got there.
Yeah.
And giving back and contributing back can be in so many different ways. Mine just happened to be directly in mentorship for free.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of us really hesitate to show up in our magic and in our gifts and offer them to the world, because we think like, oh, anything I can offer, someone can find in a book or online, or like there's someone that's a better mentor or teacher of that than I am. And like, I will say, like, no, look at the state of the world around you. Like, the world will stop needing coaches and sexual healers and meditation teachers and breathwork instructors when the world shows up collectively in a way that like creates evidence of having a regulated well-being. I don't know, but like, look around you. Like, we need you. We need people, being in service in that way. And what I love about having Andrew here is that like his way of doing that is not his job necessarily, but it is a beingness that he brings into every day. Like for me, like it's very clear that I'm in my purpose. I have this podcast, I do the things, I work with people. But for Andrew, it's like, how can he bring this leadership and this emotional intelligence into his family? Like sitting down with Andrew and his mom for the first time was mind-boggling, the level of like intention that he brought into a place like that. And then I've heard him on, work calls and hearing the way that he shows up in those spaces to have people feel seen and heard and respected. Like you respect the people that you work with and the people that, you're leading that are below you. Below you, is that the right word?
I don't use that word. Yeah. But like in the hierarchy of the org chart. Yes.
Yes. So it's like this, like, you don't need to wait until like you feel like you found your like special magical gift of like acro yoga or like reading, I don't know, like ketamine charts or something. Like you can do it now in what you're doing and being now.
Yeah, I love to tell this little story that I also have just totally stolen. Also, none of this is mine. I didn't come up with any of this stuff. I've borrowed all of this from people that had way more experience than I did.
And you had your own experience that it makes it embodied and relatable and like authentic as well.
And so in the giving back piece and like not having it's true that I can't give away what I don't have. That's true.
Yep.
100%. And like, where am I setting the bar? So when I was first not drinking, and getting sober, the bar for me of being like, how did I give back today was like, did I like hold the door open for an old lady one time? And I would give myself, I was like, I am the greatest human, that I am like Jesus and Buddha rolled into one of how amazing I am because I did this one thing, right? So the bar doesn't have to start at I mentor 14 people and I have the podcast with like 9 million listeners, blah, 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 blah. It can start wherever I'm at.
Yeah.
And then what'll happen is, at least through my experience, over time, it'll be like, well, I've now established a new bar for myself and I don't get the same juice out of giving back in that way that I used to.
Yeah.
I get accustomed, my barometer changes.
That's the beauty of having a quote unquote Northstar that is your well-being.
Bingo.
Or your higher self. It's like
Bingo.
That Northstar actually doesn't change. Just the ways of being that are getting you closer and closer just become more natural, and you start to unfold into the next iteration that gets you closer to that. What do you feel like that is for you now?
What do you mean?
Sorry to cut you off.
No, yeah. What do you mean?
Where do you feel like you're expanding and growing into your higher self in this moment? Like you've been doing a lot of things one way and it's feeling like you've got that stuff down. Like what's the next growth edge?
Oh, great question. Okay. So I'll use, this is totally related. I'll have like the shadow side of using well-being as my North Star.
Okay.
And that is, and this will relate to answering your question.
Here for it.
So the caveat I'll give to it, or the asterisk, is be careful what time frame that I'm talking about for well-being.
Okay.
And also be careful about the used car salesman. That's what I like to call it inside of my head, which the better I get at all this woo-woo stuff, the better that guy gets at convincing me that I'm making a decision that's in my highest good and for well-being.
Yeah.
And you'll understand what I mean by this in a minute. So I was an individual contributor, software engineer, which means basically I'm the one who's writing the code.
Yeah.
And leadership opportunities kept presenting themselves to me.
Mm-hmm.
This was like years and years and years ago. And I was like, nope, I don't need the headaches. I don't need the blah, blah, blah. It's like 10x the headaches for like 10% more pay. I don't need it. No, thanks. I'm good. No, it's not in my highest good. It's not, I'm here for well-being. No, thanks. No, thanks.
That's what your salesman was saying.
What I thought, but I didn't think it was my salesman. I thought that was me. It's good. And
yeah,
leadership isn't for me. I don't want it. No, thank you. Fast forward, and actually not fast forward, because a part of me thought that the only people who really wanted to be leaders were absolute fucking sociopaths, psychopaths, narcissists. Those, if you wanted to lead, that's kind of what you were, because you just liked power over people. And that's a little bit true. It does attract those types.
It does.
The funny part is that that's actually a great reason or to get into leadership.
Yep.
Is because if I'm not those things, what I'm doing is taking a space away from one of those people.
Yep.
And it's almost my duty and responsibility
Amen.
to fill that slot up so that someone else doesn't have to. And all the people that would be under that person don't experience being under a person like that.
Yeah.
So I'm going, here I am, like patting myself on the back for my mentorship and like, yeah, blah, blah, blah. I'm doing this great. Meanwhile, there's like 10 engineers minimum and their families that are suffering somewhere underneath this manager who sucks that I could be taking.
That is the price of not showing up.
Exactly. It's like, if I don't live up to the impact that I've been put here and given the skills to do, then I'm kind of selling the world short.
Yep. It's your duty.
And it's a bit selfish, and that's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to be selfish to a point.
Yeah.
And so shifting my perspective in leadership, I went, oh, so to answer your question, where's my growth edge, right?
Yeah.
It's in the degree and the level of impact throughout, not just my mentorship privately, but my work. It's like, okay, so how many folks, I don't like the word under me, but how many folks am I impacting where I work and through my career, and how am I impacting them? That's one facet of life. And then the second, and there's another very short anecdote with this one, is with my family.
Yeah.
And this was a game changer. Mom, I love you. I'm going to share some vulnerable stuff. So my relationship with my mom and my mom's side of the family a couple of years ago was like a 6 out of 10. It wasn't like, it wasn't the worst, but there was so much room for improvement. It was kind of like, and my mom knows all of this already, so this isn't a surprise to her.
Mm-hmm.
And this is to no fault of her own. I was like, I did stuff out of duty, and I did the bare minimum in my family because I didn't think I had any agency or control over the trajectory of my family. Again, letting that leadership just fall on the ground. I'm like, I'm powerless here. Got no control over this. These folks and me, we're just ingrained. This is the way we are. This is how it is. Okay. Then it was presented to me, and a question was asked to me. It was like, well, what if you did? What if you did take the leadership and role in your family? What if you did declare a vision for your family and tell your family where you saw, you got consensus on where we were, and then got enrollment on where we wanted to be?
Yeah. Powerful. I think that we need more example of that. I think that can be hard. Like I understand everything that you're saying because I know you, I know your family. We've been through the same sort of programs that educate us on the language that you're using. But what does it mean to take the leadership role in your family, kind of have a vision for the family, and then get your family behind that vision? What does that mean? What does it take?
Yeah, thanks for the question, for clarifying. I'm like speaking very abstractly. And I'll go into concrete details. So, and I said this exactly to my stepdad, Craig. This is exactly how I phrased it to him. I was like, Craig, I get the feeling like we all feel like we're kind of doing all of this stuff out of a sense of duty because we have to. I was like, my vision for this family is that we get together because we want to. We don't have to, what's the phrase that he said? I'm going to butcher what Craig said, so I'm going to try my O's at paraphrasing it. But it's like, oh, I've got to move things around because I have to go and do this family thing. Fuck all that noise. I want us to want to be together. I want Christmas time to roll around and for us to get excited.
Can you imagine?
Right? I want to get a call from my mom and going, hey, we're coming to Austin. Like what, like, and me to light up.
And not be stressed about family coming in town and all the things, but be like, this is going to be nourishing because our relationship
Bingo
is what it is now.
That's my vision. That's what I want. Is that what you want? And they're like, fuck yeah, that's what we want. I think that's what everybody wants for them is deep, meaningful relationships that light them up.
Yeah.
And so that's me explaining where we were at. That's me explaining what my vision was. And then it was like, okay, well, how do we get there?
Mm-hmm.
And so for us, again, this is not prescriptive. This is just with the context of my family and what worked for us. You might have a totally different situation, an entirely different context. But what worked for us was my mom and I, we started going to family therapy together, just my mom and I. And we hashed, and I won't go into details with any of that stuff, but there was just some stuff that needed to be talked about.
Yeah.
Needed to be said that was unsaid.
Yeah.
So we got that out, and then we got some tools to communicate in the ways that we really want to communicate with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And then I owned my part in our relationship and the defects that I had in our relationship, and she owned her part in her defects in the relationships. I'm like, great. Now that we know those what our defects are, what's the antithesis of those? And for me, my defect was, I don't really like that word, but my area of growth was vulnerability with my mom. For me, when my mom calls, like, everything's great, I'm crushing it, I'm great, stuff is awesome, work is great, relationships, yeah, I know I'm single, but it's awesome, she's out there and it's going to be awesome, blah blah blah. Everything else is good. Meanwhile, there's stuff that's not good.
Yeah. And just holding that back.
Exactly, just holding that back. Now I get an opportunity to be vulnerable with my mom. Now she's a resource. So if my mom calls me, it's like, what's going down? Like, I can tell her the stuff that's going great. I can also tell her the stuff that's not so great. And now I have a pal and a buddy and a partner to help me problem solve and troubleshoot this, or just fucking listen.
Yeah.
And my family as a whole, we all went through a leadership and emotional intelligence training together, which was also fucking awesome. And Leola's doing it too. We won't get into details here. So my mom, my stepdad, me, and then my dad, before he died, committed to going as well, and then paid for it and signed up. And so I had enrolled my whole family into this journey to take together. So now we identify what we didn't want and what wasn't working. We had a vision for where we wanted to be, and then the steps that we had where we wanted to take it. Yeah. Therapy, and then this particular course that was like 5 months long. And where are we? Well, now everything is perfect and there are no problems, and we are riding into the sunset behind a rainbow. No, but it is fucking so much better. And this was I had no idea this would be a side effect. Being responsible for that shift in my family took me from thinking something was completely impossible. Yeah. I did not think that I was like, there is a 0% chance of anything shifting to, holy shit, did we actually just shift as a family? And we did. Like, the amount of power that I felt, I was like, well, I can do that. What the fuck else can I do?
Amen.
I was like, oh my God.
I was hoping you were going there, like, and you did.
What the fuck else can I do? And that was a backdrop from meeting you and having like a complete catapulting in my career and and continues to pay dividends.
And that's the beauty of really investing in yourself, is that I think we can both look back and say that the self-development work that we've done in the past 3 years is critical to us finding each other and falling in love and having the tools that we have to succeed in this way.
It's one thing to sign up and pay for a course or a mastermind or whatever. It's a whole other thing to integrate it when it's hard as fuck.
Mm-hmm.
And that first phone call that I made to Craig,
your stepdad,
my stepdad, to enroll our family into a different path was the scariest phone call I had ever made in my life until I dialed the phone. Then it was like a breeze, actually, because Craig was like super enrolled in it. I had made this giant story in my head, but it was hard as fuck for me.
But that's what it is, being vulnerable. You're putting yourself at risk for the rejection.
Yes.
You're putting yourself at risk for the heartbreak, of the judgment of someone in your family that you're going to have to be around again.
Yep.
And so that Brené Brown says it perfectly. Vulnerability, though, is the birthplace of love, of growth, of evolution, of all the things that we deeply desire. We have to be vulnerable first to have a really amazing family. We have to be vulnerable enough to say, things aren't working. Are you in this with me? To move up in your job and to take, a new position, you have to be vulnerable enough to apply yourself and put yourself out there and ask for it. To be in a relationship and to fall in love, you have to be vulnerable enough to say, like, I know that this might end in heartbreak, or actually inevitably will, because it will either end in a breakup or death. Basically, those are the two options.
The best option is that it ends in death.
Exactly.
The best option.
But then when you're falling in love, like that, you're going to be vulnerable, and like that's just the reality of the situation. So at the end of the day, vulnerability.
It's so funny. I was just in a meeting that was way over my expertise and experience that I was running. And I don't recommend this. And again, this isn't prescriptive. I feel like I've given that disclaimer a lot. But I started the meeting with thanks everybody for showing up. I have no idea what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I've never run a meeting like this. I don't know what to do. And at any point in time, if anyone wants to like jump in and push me in a different direction, because it's not the direction this meeting needs to go, that's totally cool. And I understand. And it was an awesome fucking meeting.
Yeah. And I think there's a fine line with that. There's a space of being vulnerable, and there's the piece where it's like, also, how do I want to say this? Do you know what I'm getting at?
I think I know what you're getting at. And like, that is me saying that is highly contextual. The group of people that I was saying that to, they had earned that level of vulnerability. Brené Brown also has a great saying that vulnerability is earned.
Yeah.
And those people in that meeting had earned that vulnerability. If I had gone in and it was like a call to a bunch of like Wall Street brokers who I'd never met before, I would never fucking say anything like that.
And why wouldn't you? For clarity.
Because they would not understand it. It would make no sense to them.
And to me, it's also like selling yourself a bit short.
Mm-hmm. It would not accomplish the goal that vulnerability is supposed to accomplish.
Yeah. So
yes, my love,
we're getting into a space of like, I feel really good about like the meat and the things that we've talked about today. And as always, there's like a bajillion other things that I want to talk to you about. And as we were having this conversation, I was like, light bulb, idea for future podcast episodes. But I want to bring this one down to land. And so I'm going to ask a couple questions.
Sweet.
And if you don't want to answer these, you don't have to, but the intention is to like build that vulnerability and have people see more of you.
I was just going to say, we just talked about vulnerability for like,
we did
20 minutes.
We did.
So I'm just going to like,
but you know that I can edit this and cut this out if you don't want to answer this.
For sure.
But if you're hearing this now, you know that Andrew chose to answer it. So, Okay. What do you want people to know about you?
What do I want people to know about me? I want them to know that I'm a regular, normal, fallible human being. And even my normal, regular, fallible self can have extraordinary results in my life.
Ooh, profound. And what do you not want people to know about you?
I don't want people to know about my eating disorder.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
This is huge that he's sharing this. I'm so surprised. Okay.
So I've shared this on Nikki's podcast before.
Okay.
But it's not like, I was on Joe Rogan or something and the whole world knows or anything like that. But sorry, didn't mean to diss Nikki either there. That wasn't a diss, but I don't want people to know that generally.
Why?
Because the story that I made up about it in my head is that it means I'm weak. Men aren't supposed to have those sorts of problems. That's like a woman thing. People will view me differently as less than. I'll be rejected. I won't be accepted. Won't be loved.
Yeah. And how does it feel to just say it?
Right now to you, totally fine. But it going out into like the ether and being shared with everybody, I actually feel pretty neutral about it.
That's a change.
And it's scary.
Yeah.
It's like both. That's weird.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that and being so vulnerable.
You're welcome.
Anything else you want to add before I close this out?
Yeah. I fucking love you so much. You have no idea. Doing this together is when I picture my like dream relationship in my mind's eye, and like you and me with a microphone in front of each other, talking about stuff that lights us up. It's like I'm literally as these words are coming out of my mouth, I am living a dream come true with you. I'm complete.
I'm speechless. I like that we started it with me complimenting you and now we're ending it.
Yeah, I like that we started it with you complimenting me and me busting your balls, and then we ended it with me being like all really sweet
and complimenting you. I love it. And I love you too. And I feel so fucking honored to have you here and to be able to use your unique way of the world to create impact. And I'm excited to keep fucking doing it. It's great.
Let's do it, love.
Stay tuned for more.
Stay tuned.
Thank you so much for opening yourself up to the idea of well-being and vulnerability, intimacy. And we'll catch you next week on Talk Tantra to Me. Ta-ta.